And as people are joining, Ed, do you want to give them a little bit of your background as people come into the room?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Ed McCaveney. I'm the tech director at the Hampton Township School District, and I used to work at the university level here in Pittsburgh, and we have a different projects. And some of it touches upon VR and augmented reality, and like obviously a lot of different hands and new technologies as we work with our kids and faculty, but also trying to keep relationships going with universities and our peers across the country and see what's new and engaging. And that's where I do a lot of work with COSIN and different levels there. And I'm part of the Driving K-12 Innovation Group. That's a national group that looks at innovation across K-12, and it's a global organization, along with a few others that are on our call today.
That's great, and I think maybe let's give it one more minute for people to populate. Of course, this webinar is being recorded, so it will be shared throughout the COSIN membership, which is very exciting. And the Driving K through 12 Innovation is probably my favorite of all of COSIN's sort of special interest groups, and it really is where the rubber meets the road, where a lot of the theory and a lot of the policy, a lot of the emerging technology, it's all of those members and really the membership of COSIN that really brings that innovation to teachers, to students, to districts, et cetera. So it's quite an exciting space to be, Ed. So excellent. And maybe I'll turn it over to you to sort of kick things off.
Yeah. Given time, people might keep popping in here as we progress. But to kick things off, let's. I'm Ed McCaveney, as I said. With us is Kathy Hirsch. She's professor of psychology at Temple University and senior fellow at the Brookings Institute. And this is our Education Meets the Universe webinar, the promise and the worry, as we look at these emerging technologies and the uses that are evolving here. With us as well, I'll let you introduce yourself, David.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm Dave Jarbo. I am the Director of Instructional Technology and STEAM in District 2 in Colorado Springs. And I'm also the co-chair for the Emerging Technology Committees. And we are just happy to bring you this series. And we're also going to put in the chat that we are publishing our next report through a blog series and invite you to join in that conversation as well with the EdTech Next 2023, which is leveraging technology for improving school wellness and safety. So we hope you can join that conversation too. And thank you, Ed. We'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. So also with us is, and you heard him as well, is Gus. And sorry, Gus, I sometimes mispronounce your last name, so I'll let you go.
You're not the only one, Ed. Yeah, I'm really here as a decades-long supporter and super fan of COSIN, its mission and its organization and its membership. One of the very best NGOs globally that supports education and its intersection with technology and policy. So very good. And I'm also here as the leadership chair of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution, right? And Dr. Kathy Hirsch-Pasek is, of course, a hero of mine and many others, but I'm here really to support her and try and bring two of these world-leading organizations together so that we can take the greatest scholarship in education and technology and bring that into practice. So thanks so much, Ed, for being here. And again, thanks, as always, to Keith for the very kind invitation.
And so diving right into things, you think of the metaverse and virtual reality and these emerging technologies like AI and human technology interaction. And one of the things that came to mind for me is the movie Johnny Mnemonic. It's a 1995 film if you never saw it. So you think of this future where they had all this interactive technology and the world was run by companies and had virtual reality and you were all interacting in those spaces. How long sometimes technologies take to become mainstream. Some technologies never make it into mainstream. But I think today, in the world that we're seeing, the internet capacity, the connectivity, the technological evolution of things, we're actually hitting. It's not this same future, but a lot of these things that were predicted way back then, their ability to be mainstream and used in a large scale is really upon us. So some of those tools that we're seeing and making headlines, a lot of it's gaming related, like this HoloLab chemistry game that was created by Shell Games here in Pittsburgh, or the popular Among Us game in VR, along with Minecraft and virtual reality. A lot of people are familiar with Minecraft, but maybe not the VR, where you're actually in there and in with the blocks. There's a lot of university connections here. Here's a human cadaver lab that's tying like the Internet of Things and that those 5G powered devices and that internet connectivity is enabling a lot of these types of interactions. A number of universities are looking at meta campuses and larger campuses. This is Victory XR. There's a virtual healthcare ecosystem with Gig XR. So not to, particular, I'm not familiar with all these as companies or anything, I'm not promoting them in any way, but there's just to get a sense of how much stuff is out there. And Gus, if you wanted to chime in about some of the higher ed work.
Certainly, it's been a great honor to work with a variety of higher education institutions as they embark upon their XR journey themselves. First among them was the project called Blended Reality at Yale University, which is really a collider of innovation on campus, which breaks down the traditional silos within a elite research university to really help innovation move forward. Using technology as kind of the convener. So at Yale, you have the School of Art, as you might expect, and the School of Drama with XR projects, but you also have the School of Management, the School of Forestry, and even Yale Law School, using these technologies in novel ways, and then crucially sharing that information amongst the entire university, but with other universities as well. And we saw so many great projects at the Harvard Graduate School of Education with Julian and Bertrand, at Columbia's ETC, or Emerging Technology Center, with Prixit and Manisha, and of course, famously and close to you, Ed, right in your neck of the woods, Carnegie Mellon's Entertainment Technology Center. So what I'm hoping is, after we hear this extraordinary presentation from Dr. Hirsch-Pasek, that we will inspire a group of COSIN members to create their own sort of community where they can incubate these great applications of XR in primary and secondary school, and really figure out how we share that information using the great convening power of COSIN. So I'm really hoping that this webinar does help create the same kind of community that exists in higher education in the United States around XR technologies.
Thank you. And thinking of these technologies and how they're advancing, so ArcGIS, if you're familiar with the SRI and the mapping software, they have a K-12. They've had a K-12 version of that that's free for schools for years. Penn State here in Pennsylvania, the Penn State campus had teacher training and other things on GIS systems and mapping. Now they've emerged from that where there's 3D maps and what they call this digital twin technology, where you have the real world and the digital world, and they're mapped together, and it replicates that, so you can see data in real time environments. There's explore these things. Companies are using this now. They're looking at, one example is cellular connectivity, so you can actually see the virtual version of it and plan out your cellular how the signals are reaching everybody. Look at where things are being blocked. But this concept of building digital twins, and even if you want to go deeply into these things, that I was looking at Penn State's campus, the other day, and they have whole master's degrees and doctor, all that kind of stuff in GIS systems and those types of things. So it's a definitely evolving career. If we look at careers for K-12 students, preparing them for the future, how we're using these technologies for our own district use or university use, but then also for future careers and other things that the students are interested in. Thinking of this in VR, in the virtual worlds, it's typically very sight and sound focused. So you're visualizing things and you're hearing in that immersive environment. But now there's newer technologies out there. This just came up in December. I saw an article about this, so I thought I'd put it included here. But they're looking at haptic skin technologies, where you actually are lots of adding more sensory to that type of environment, where you can actually feel what the things that you touch and things like that. You get that kind of feedback. We had actually two students last year create here in Hampton. Some of our high school students built a virtual reality weightlifting simulator. They took a reel and with a fishing line kind of technology, and they hooked it into an Arduino appliance. And so when you pick the virtual weights up, it changes the tension on the reel. So you have a 5-pound weight, and they estimated the tension they needed versus a 10-pound weight. And they didn't have a whole huge range of weights yet, but they were in their development stage. But the one student was the coder, and the other student was the hardware person, better at the hardware, and they worked together as a team, and they built this VR virtual exercise piece, and they were demoing that to people. We had an open house, and we were demoing to parents and other people coming through.
Can I jump in, Ed?
So it's interesting how students are there. Yeah, Norton, you were there for that.
I'm Norton Gusky, and I work with Ed, and we've been colleagues for a number of years. And I'm also been with David as co-chair for the Emerging Technologies Committee in the past. And I took the picture, yes. And so what I wanted to highlight is when Ed talked about future careers, these kids are already thinking about making this into their business. They're already thinking entrepreneurially. And I think this whole idea of a new generation and how this technology gives our students opportunities that I never had. I don't think most of us here ever had. And so I think this is what's really exciting to me, is that it's not just that they're using the technology, but they're already thinking about how to take it to that next level.
Thank you. And so at our middle school, we built what's called the Learning Pavilion. We had a large lobby area that had a somewhat interactive exhibit, but it was based on environmental. It had lots of sculpt animals. It's more like a museum exhibit. But we thought about modernizing that. Our middle school thought about modernizing. They partnered with the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon's Entertainment Technology Center on this unique redesign of our lobby space. So part of that, they conceptualized the drawing. They have this kind of interactive area, physical structure. This kids can come through and move through, and there's different centers basically within that. And then what they did with CMU's component is they had with the Arena XR environment they have. So it's this virtual reality AI environment that you can run different types of technology in, or extended reality or XR, where you combine the physical with the virtual. So they have a platform to build that. And what they did is they came in this augmented reality edge network architecture, they call it, or Arena. They came into our lobby, and they scanned the lobby with LiDAR scanning technology and other things, and they mapped it. So we have a digital twin of our lobby. So creating that digital twin, they added textures and other things. So we actually could recreate that space and turn it into a Egyptian, tomb or some other thing. But right now, it's basically mirror image of the physical space. So it's painted the same way, the textures are mapped the same way, and you see those in the virtual world. So the teachers went to a workshop with CMU's faculty in the ETC Center, and then we also had student leaders there, and they worked through Tinkercad. So they were familiar with Tinkercad from the 3D printing stuff. So we said, hey, you already know how to build models in there that you're printing. Let's take those models and here's how you can put them into the virtual space. So that augmented reality came in part of the course that they did at the middle school level. It's still very much a prototype. We're one of the first schools with them working in them in that capacity in the country. And luckily they're right down the road. So it's easy to work with them in that scale. But so now different classrooms and teachers come to this space. So you can see kind of this is the LiDAR scan left, and then the kind of the hybrid mapped world, and then the physical structure here. So I'm going to skip through parts of this video, not show you the whole thing.
Hello and welcome to the Hampton.
But and I might have forgotten to show this now again.
We're committed to thoughtfully designing the Learning Pavilion.
Were you able to hear that or no?
In conjunction with
so
two
here's the LiDAR
outside partners,
technology.
Carnegie Mellon University Entertainment Technology Center, and also
so it creates that digital
Children's
map
Museum of Pittsburgh.
of the whole center.
Both of those organizations helped our teachers to think outside the box.
And then what we do is our principal, this is our middle school principal talking.
So what you see today may look very different next year.
And so we can, because it's a digital environment, we can change it out and upgrade it in a more seamless way. So this digital environment, as you're coming through, you have a map room, but then you also have a VR
that our
map
8th grade
within
students
the
will actually
physical map
program
room.
throughout the school year.
And
we
then
should
for
also mention that our
mathematical
students will
concepts,
learn
they
very
added
important
the
soft
Z-axis
skills such as
to the X and Y, and then sorry, I meant to end the video and I clicked in slideshow, but so you're seeing all of us. But here, I'm going to reshare my screen here real quick. In the
And let me just jump in a minute, because what I think is really important is that sometimes technology is just something that those of us who are kind of geeks get excited about. But what was amazing to me when I visited Ed and talked with his teachers and his students is how they accepted this technology, and how the teachers who were not those teachers who would have been jumping out at every opportunity saw how this made a difference in their teaching. We were having a conversation earlier in another COSIN meeting about artificial intelligence and how it can change in terms of the role of the teacher. And that's what's happening at Hampton when I talk with these teachers. They saw the technology giving them new opportunities to meet the needs of their learners in a way that they couldn't do before. And I think that's really one of the keys to the success that Ed and his team have really designed and developed this.
And so thinking of these types of technologies that aren't necessarily at scale, some of them are becoming at scale. How are we preparing for these things? And this is where the work from Dr. Kathy Hirsch-Pasek comes into play. And so I'll let her take over.
Well, thanks, Ed, and thank you, Norton. I mean, your comments are so right on. I mean, I think educators have always been stuck in the middle here. You know, especially last year, last couple of years when things went remote, and everyone was really trying to figure out what to do to create a more digital educational opportunity. And we didn't do such a good job, you know? So I think everyone's on the market, and this may be the challenge, all of you out there at COSN, come on along, let's figure this out together, and let's make it really the best that we can be. And it can be. I really do think that things like the metaverse, things like the examples you saw from CMU and from Penn State and the high school that you're working with, they're just the leading edge and just the beginning. And I don't want to suggest we're all going to become bionic, but I think that there was a wave of technology where what we did is we just took what we had in the non-tech world and plopped it in the tech world. And I think what we're learning to do right now that to me is very exciting is we're learning how to use the unique properties of the digital world to bring something new, something that you cannot get by just plopping the non-digital world into the digital world. So with that as a beginning, let's go to the next slide. All over the news, I think we're seeing and hearing about the metaverse. In fact, I am sure we could have a discussion among the 20 of us on this call about what is the metaverse anyway. So I just wanted to give you a few of the quotes that have been bandied around. This is by Tom Metzinger. Virtual reality is the representation of possible worlds and possible selves, with the aim of making them appear as real as possible, ideally by creating a subjective sense of presence and full immersion in the user. Or the next quote, which comes from somebody who's very familiar, Mark Zuckerberg, who's telling us that the metaverse is likely the next chapter in the internet. Now, I couldn't give you all the quotes that I have found from Brown and beyond, but I will tell you that the way people are talking about this right now, about this era that we are in right now, is that it's kind of like the beginning of the internet. And for those old enough to remember that, it literally changed the entire world. And I would say the next wave to hit the scene was when, oh my God, look what we can do with the iPhone. But it's hard for us to remember that that only came around in 2007, that the iPad has only been with us, you know, for the last 13 years. That's like mind-boggling, right? And now here we are on the cusp of the metaverse. So next slide, please. It's all over the news. This was what we saw in metaverse gameplay, which is what Ed mentioned. You know, there's a lot of gameplay trying to use, especially Roblox. And in October, the New York Times did a full spread on what it meant to hang out in the metaverse, mostly as a social thing, not an educational thing, but still was quite interesting to see what was going on. Next slide, please. Meta is actually betting its future, $6 billion investment on things like Horizon Worlds. So again, we're going to see a lot of this. And now onto the next slide. And the implications for education as I see it, and I really come from the science of learning perspective, is that students will be able in the future to take virtual field trips. That for the first time in our history, I think the magic school bus is not just a television show and a book, but actually we're going to be able to go inside the human heart. We may even be able to pretend we're doctors and do heart transplants or to visit the age of the dinosaurs. Next slide, please. I want you to imagine what we could do in teaching history if we could actually not just see the ruins of today, but to somehow walk backwards on a timeline that was projected on the floor of our classroom and go all the way back to the years 500 BC, we would see Greek culture. Not quite yet. We would see Greek culture. We would see how these temples were built. We would see the architecture as it was in the remains of today. And we would come to understand that the earth itself is a kind of storybook if we just know how to discover it. And imagine if we each had avatars working with a teacher. Notice I am not bopping out the teacher. I think teachers are our guides in education. But what if we worked with teachers to become archaeologists and discover, how do we know what it was like in the year 500 BC if all we see right now is junk on the ground? Next slide, please. But as we approach this future, and there we go, there are a couple of things we have to think about in the beginning before we actually really invent it and make it usable for education. The first is, how do we build it? How do we build it in a way that is going to meet the educational goals that are required in 2023 and for the businesses of the future? Next, how do we build a metaverse so it's equitably available? That is a really big deal question. And I just saw that yesterday, a new report was offered by the World Bank that dealt with this issue and with the issue of safety. Third question, how do we build a metaverse so it's actually usable? Right now, it's kind of clunky, but we know it's going to get better and better. And how do we build a metaverse so that it's safe? Next slide, please. On the issue of building a metaverse that optimizes education, I think what we are learning is that we kind of know a lot about how human brains work. And that's not at all what we are using to teach kids today. For example, I just left my class before I came here. It was first day of the term. And I asked my students at Temple University, so I'm just curious, give me the first word that comes to mind when you think of school. Here are the honest to God answers I got in the last half hour. Monotonous, boring, terrible, stressful. And I said, okay, can you guys tell me, please, there must have been something good about school. I know you're all thinking about it. So the 20 of you must have the answer. It's recess and seeing my friends. Now it has to be that we can design something like a metaverse to be as engaging as recess, but with an educational goal. So next slide, please. The way I envision this design comes straight from the science. The first piece is that I think we have to do a better job of really investing in understanding cultural values and contextual differences. And I think if we start there with what people want to know, what they want to understand, that we're going to go far, far beyond where we are right now in education. As you know, there's an entire parents movement going on because truly, unless you're in a community school, many of the schools and educators have left parents behind. They need to be part of the discussion. And Brookings has just done a beautiful piece on community education with Rebecca Winthrop, and I encourage you all to see it. If that's part one of the equation, the next part of the equation is, what's the science of how human beings learn? Can we teach in the way that brains learn? And I'm going to suggest to you, I know this is going to sound awful, but we are teaching today in exactly the opposite way of how human brains learn. And the third is the science of what we need to learn. What do you need to know to be successful in the 21st century? And I'll go into each of these in a minute. Next slide, please. So for the science of how we learn, I put it under the heading of active playful learning. So let's just look at it for a moment. Human beings learn best, brains learn best when they're active, not passive. Look at those kids in the classroom that Ed showed us. I mean, those kids were actively inventing, engaging. Believe me, they will remember this 15 years from now, okay? And much of what they teach, what we teach them, they won't. It should be engaging rather than distracting. Keep their minds on. It should be meaningful to them, not disconnected. When we teach something like history, who kind of cares what happened in 500 BC if we don't make it real to what we need to know today? Social It turns out the brain is socially gated. And what I mean by that is that humans learn best with other humans, with teachers, with guides, not by being just taught as if they are empty vessels, and not by doing it solo. Next, we learn best when it's iterative. When we have something we kind of know and then we build on it, like in problem solving, which is, I'm sure, precisely how they made that beautiful hand that you showed us, Ed. They had to start and keep revising and keep revising. And it should be joyful. Add that to a learning goal, and you have a how of learning that, as I say, I call active playful learning. By the way, it's catching on. I just heard the Boston school systems, the Philadelphia school systems are moving to active learning models. Then what do we need to learn for the future? I'm going to argue that it's the 6 C's, a model that builds on itself, where the first part is how to get along with others, how to communicate well with others, reading, speaking, and listening. We need to learn our content, but it's not good for us if we don't know critical thinking beyond the content, creative innovation, or the confidence to take an intellectual risk, not just to spit back what we have learned. This is what business leaders are telling us right now. I call it the 6 C's, and we're implementing this how and what of learning, the 3-part equation, in the state of New Hampshire right now in the school systems, and we are about to be implementing it in 4 more states around the country. Next slide, please. Now, in educational apps, when they hit, and about 2011, just after the iPad, they became very, very popular. Tech got ahead of the science of learning. We did not have a seat at the table as people were rushing to get their product into the Apple Store. I'd like to suggest that we have an opportunity right now to do differently with the tech that's around the bend. And by the way, you might ask, how well did those so-called educational apps do? Not well at all, especially when evaluated against what people learned and against the 3-part equation. In fact, Meyer et al. Studied this with a paper that we had come out in 2021 with Jenny Radetzky, who may be a familiar name to some of you. It turns out that only about 5 of the 100 most downloaded apps for young children actually met the bar for having any educational value. We can do better. And I challenge all of you out there to think about how to do better by building the science of learning, how we learn and what we learn, into your products. Next slide, please. Now, what about equitable access? The infrastructure here is just being built. But if we go the way of the digital apps, we are going to create an inequitable system. What happened is the rich kids got the advantage of having all those apps, if it was an advantage, and kids who were from under-resourced environments didn't have access to the internet. They couldn't use it. That has to be changed. The infrastructure has to reach all neighborhoods and communities, and the access to that infrastructure has to be affordable. Now, the metaverse is just coming around the pike. We've already heard about a school that is using some of these techniques. But what I'd love to encourage us to think about, next challenge for your group, Cozen, is that I wonder if we could create something like an IMAX studio within communities as a start, which has the metaverse and invites all schools to have virtual field trips, whether it be in history, in building boats, in fun ways to do Leonardo da Vinci builds in mathematics. Imagine what we could do experientially if we started somewhere so that it was accessible to all. Next slide, please. Eventually, access has to be available in these community settings. There is, in fact, a classroom group that's starting to build this. It's called Eduverse. I haven't personally evaluated this yet, but I did see it. So I wanted you to know that it's there and you can go and visit it, but I'm not endorsing it. Next slide, please. Now we have to ask about usability. Look at these clunky glasses. Even the newest stuff, the A3 smart glasses, they're still not really made for younger heads. So one thing to think about is how we're going to really create a metaverse that optimizes usability in classes and with glasses that can actually be used and are light and are usable by all kids of all ages. Next slide, please. Finally, on safety. Most of the World Bank report is on, oh my gosh, what are we going to do here? This is going to be a terribly unsafe environment. And the questions we need to ask is, can there be regulations to prevent students from entering possible worlds that harness hate and bigotry? This is one of the questions that the New York Times October 9th article came up with. And is there some way to create safe spaces so that a class can go on that bus trip, but we don't have intruders who can just join in? Next slide, please. Well, we're just at the beginning. To date, the metaverse is not designed with educators. It is not equitable. It is not usable. And there are no regulations to make it safer. So my challenge is to let educators and scientists sit around the table with you as you do these designs, so then we can make it the very best that it can be. And that's what we wrote about in our Brookings report, A Whole New World, Education Meets the Metaverse. I'm also going to invite you to a February 17th event at Brookings, where we are going to talk about changes in education, and tech will be a part of that discussion. Next slide, please. Now, we need to have these discussions now, because if we don't start these discussions now, and you'll see that Yadan's already talking about it, the Learning and Teaching Expo in 2022 was talking about it, it's going to get away from us, just like the app world got away from us. Next slide, please. And the bottom line is that we need to lean in and not run away from new technology. But I think what we have to do is we have to do it right. Embrace it, but get the right people working on the product. Next slide, please. Finally, I wanted to add an addendum of a piece that came out last Monday that I wrote on ChatGPT. I think it's on everyone's mind. We're all uttering it in our sleep these days. And while the metaverse is on the horizon, whether it's ChatGPT or the new drawing or the New York Times article on filming, oh my gosh, that is here now. So in this piece, we actually lean into it. I know New York has banned it. I know the Seattle school systems banned it. I was told in my first class this semester that our school has banned access to ChatGPT, and we're not the only university out there that has. You'll have to hear from everybody else on the panel whether theirs has too. And I told my students, do a workaround. I want you to use ChatGPT as a learning tool. In the same way that I think we can't take or shouldn't take calculators out of a math class, I think let's take ChatGPT, lean in, and ask them to see how to better it. If we want critical thinkers and creative innovators in the future, it's our job, I believe, to show them how to do it with the tools that they can use today. Next slide, please. So follow me at Kathy in row 1 on Twitter, where I do put up some of the stuff that I find, at the Center for Universal Education at Brookings, where I blog. And I want to thank you and Gus for inviting me today to think about these issues and final challenge, guys, join us. Let's build this together. Let's make it the very best tool that it can be. You guys have the expertise on the tech end. There are educators here on the panel. Let's sit together, and I know we can create magic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we're at the Q&A part of the session on the screen share here, so we can see each other. But thinking of that ChatGPT, it's funny. We were talking the other day here in Pittsburgh, me and Norton, who's on the call, and a few others, about that as part of our Three Rivers Education Technology Conference that we have here in Pittsburgh. One of the things we talked about is, like, that's could be the new baseline Like, so if somebody wants to write that and not put any real thought, just being able to phrase the question properly and they get a report out, how do they, like, the teaching expectation would elevate and that would be the baseline. So how do students improve upon that? Now the tools can continue to evolve, and we've seen some other tools that so how do the technology is going to continue evolving? We have to evolve with it and other things and change up certain things. So that's always a challenge for us, no matter what. Going back to when television came about, things like that.
And the phone, by the way, and the phone. I mean, people are very worried.
Yes, yeah, calculators,
so, you know,
like
Ed,
photo math, all these apps and things that do that stuff.
And I know one of your students did a magnificent job. It was all written, it was all over the news about one of your students creating a way to detect that somebody has used ChatGPT.
Oh, that was not my student. That was at one of the universities. But yeah, I shared that.
I know it was
the
Princeton.
GTP 0. Yeah.
I thought maybe he had worked with you too, but here's
no. We've had a few students go on to those universities as well, but it's hard for me to keep track of all of them. But
no,
yeah,
that's not
one of ours. Yeah.
But I don't know, my take on this, and I'd love to hear your take too. You know, really, Keith, David, Norton, Gus, chime in. But my take on this is that what I really want when I give an essay question is I don't just want somebody who can synthesize. I want somebody who can be a critical thinker and who gives me a new thesis. And I'm going to make a bold statement, but I would love to know your take on it. I'm just writing it up now, and I'll probably get slammed for it, but what the heck. In 1995, Daniel Pink wrote a beautiful book. I think it was called A Whole New Mind. And in it, he said that he expected the world was really changing, and that the people who were going to be rewarded were not going to be the people who could just crank out code or could, you know, do the analytics, but the ones who could find patterns. And he said it was the move from the industrial age to what he called at that time the conceptual age. At the same time, the business world was moving to what they called the knowledge age, you know? Well, all right, now stick with me. Here's the real controversial part. I'm wondering if all this doesn't move us to a new phase. Let me, for the moment, call it the creative age. And in the creative age, synthesis of all the information that's been coming at us since the internet, and especially since the invention of Google, is no longer going to be as valuable when you have ChatGPT and when you have the kinds of AI developments in art, in film, in music, etc. So I said to my students, okay, guys, if you turn in a ChatGPT, you will pass. You will get a C. And if you want a C in this honors class, go ahead. But if you want to get above a C, show me what you got. Show me that you've moved on to the creative age and that you can create a new thesis and defend it with the most current material that's out there, not just that which can be synthesized as an either or compare and contrast. And so that's the challenge I'm putting to my students. And I was pleasantly surprised by their very positive response.
So, so I see one of the, he did a keynote at the COSIN conference a couple of years ago, and he's had a couple books come out around motivation of learning and things like that that really tie into that. Mm-hmm. And then, but I thought I liked what you said about the devices, because me as a tech director in K-12, that's one of the challenges we've had is the affordability of devices. If we build a classroom set, how do you get everybody to use that? Or like when I was in higher ed, one of the faculty I worked with, we talked about silos, you know, in versus our science centers. Not everybody has access to a science center in their community, you know, things like that, where you can build these spaces or do things, or the silo is always booked and that one person never wants to take their class down the hall, versus like when we got to one-to-one devices where everybody has one and they're able to access that technology more readily. But the headsets and the smaller kids, like versus just maintaining it, the hardware, from my perspective, it becomes challenging in districts. So like that evolution of the hardware and things, it's definitely gotten better versus the Google, the cardboard kind of stuff that we had. But then everybody, you could only fit an iPhone into it, or an iPod type size device, but all of our kids had iPads. So then, you know, they couldn't immerse the same way, they could access the stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to jump in because I really think we have to think about what holds things back, and the glasses hold us back.
Yes.
So where are there technologies, and they're out there, and I'll share a few of them, that are mixed reality, that allow us to have a lot of the benefits of what we're talking about without the limitations and the handicaps. So I was visiting a district that's a rural district in the area a couple of weeks ago that has a sports medicine, and they're having now their students basically do the cadavers and all the work, but it's a mixed reality application that was developed in Kentucky that does not require glasses. But every student basically can go into the human body and do all the kinds of things we're talking about. We have here in Pittsburgh projects like that have come out of the Entertainment Technology Center, that have come out of Carnegie Mellon, that allow students to have that kind of access. There's one school district, Cornell, and Ed, you might know the one that Chris Hubb was doing, where they were looking at environmental biomes. And again, it didn't require the use of glasses, but it allowed the kids to have experiences in types of biomes that they never could have explored by having that opportunity on screen, and then taking that learning into the classroom in a dynamic way where the teacher owns it and the students own it. So I think we have to look at some of those, and then hopefully down the road, the technology will catch up in terms of glasses and other things. But let's really highlight the technology that allows for equitable access, that allows and addresses the things you were talking about, where you can have safety and the needs for all those elements, but without adding another layer that makes it limited to schools that can afford it.
So if I can just chime in.
Yeah, we often refer to that as scaling innovation. You know, how do we do those types of things?
Yeah, if I can chime in real quick, because we are leveraging that technology now, and we do it through a district lending library, where we have some sets that really, they're compared to other technology, they're not unobtainable. And so we're able to allow, and I use it with our elementary kids. I can go in to a classroom and we co-teach with the teachers, and then they go from there, because they're the experts. But we can take a group of second graders through 5 different climate zones in a virtual reality setting within 20 minutes, and they're able to go and explore and see the things. So they go and they can see what the Arctic looks like, they can see what the deserts look like, and then they can compare and contrast. And this is all within 20 minutes within a class period. So I think it is possible now. I don't think it's unobtainable if you get creative with your funding. At middle school, I know we're not branding or promoting anything, but we do use Oculus. We have sets that we can use and teachers can borrow, and we can take kids to the International Space Station and they can literally float around the space station. We can take them to the Antarctic and they can paddle a canoe and go, they can hike up, do ice climbing and look at this is through Nat Geo. And some of these resources, some of the applications are free that companies have invested in, and they're willing to invest in us. So I think it is obtainable when you get creative with your financing, and it is a wonderful opportunity. When you see the kids and the way they engage, and go back to the science of learning, because it's a full body experience. And I mean, just that immersiveness, I think, boosts education. There's a research now to support that it does, we kind of went from text to video and said, oh, video is so much more immersive and kids learn more, the brain learns more. XR is the next level of that engagement and retention. And they also use it with career and tech training, muscle memory, all of those things are now in play. And I just challenge people to get creative and find ways so that students can explore that. We are a title district.
And you bring up a good point there. The amount of content, like the amount of content that's being developed and being available, like some of these early on companies and other things, they had kind of one main scenario and you invest it, and then the kids went through it and they all went through it. And it's like, we need more content. We've already explored this in depth. Where else can we go? But now there seems to be definitely a much broader plethora of content out there, and it's high quality content. Some of the new scanning technologies, they've created, surfaces and mapped like it's super realistic, high resolution scans of things that's now being built into these worlds to make them so realistic. And the photography quality of the video, things like that.
And those
Gus,
mediums,
you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, well, first, I wanted to give David a standing ovation. I think everything you just said over the past 2 minutes really did sort of honor Kathy's sort of six-tiered approach to education, and making sure that or observing and noticing that active playful learning equals more engagement, equals more attention, equals a lean in instead of lean back and watch a video passively, right? And really interacting. And I don't like to give out endorsements either, but I have to give out 3 endorsements to really great researchers who are looking at these mediums, whether it's the learning environments, whether it's collaborating in VR worlds, and I'll actually do 4. So one is Pierre Dillenborg, really the father of classroom orchestration at EPFL in Switzerland. The other is Ken Holstein at Carnegie Mellon and his Koala Lab. Absolutely amazing. The third is the famous Eric Klopfer at the MIT Education Arcade, the Scheller teacher education program. And the fourth is Julian Radu at HGSE, who is just can't stop publishing papers on exactly what David described. So what I would really love to see, and it's what I talked about at the beginning of this call, what I'd really love to see is a bridge built between CoSN, who are the doers, right, who are the people who are actually going out and doing this, with great experts like Dr. Hirsch Pasek, who I now use interchangeably with Kathy, and I hope that's allowed, Kathy, and some of this great research that's being done at higher ed, but only 4 people are reading these, or going to JSTOR and reading these papers. Let's get that innovation and let's get it into schools, especially the ones that have been RCT'd or appropriately A/B tested or interrogated fully for their efficacy. So let's build that bridge, and I think the community starts here at CoSN. I always am struck when I go to the CoSN annual conference and just see all the blood, sweat, and tears and the know-how about bringing technology and all of the warts and all of the everything else, but really the heroic effort of the membership of CoSN to bring this and deliver it to the students and teachers all over the United States and really all over the world, because CoSN is a global org now. So anyway, it's kind of an impassioned speech to say, let's build that bridge and take the evidence-based scholarship and bring it into the classroom and do it in an expedient way that's not going to take 5 years, where you own the narrative and not some for-profit company.
Gus, could you put some of that information in the chat? A question just came out.
Norton's there as well. Yeah. And I was going to say, so for those attendees that are on, if for the question and answer, obviously we're having some extending conversations from what we've just heard and met with each other. But if you want to submit some of your questions, the raise your hand kind of thing. But the probably it's better to submit those in the chat. That way we record them and we can repeat them for everybody more effectively. But beyond that, we can keep on talking about things. We're running up toward, we have about 10 minutes left in the allotted time. And then, so we're happy to try to keep talking about this, but yeah, like the university, like talking to Gus about the Koala Lab here at CMU. I'm familiar with a lot of things CMU does, but I'm not directly there anymore. I was at one of the neighboring universities, but it's hard to keep up with what everybody's doing everywhere. But that's where CoSN helps us bring people together, and we get updates from people. The CoSN conference coming up in Austin in March. There's lots of opportunities, or Kathy, the event you talked, the Brookings event you talked about. There's lots of opportunities to get together, and that's how we keep learning and keep innovating and sharing ideas and expanding upon them. Gus threw his email in the chat. There we go.
If anybody wants to be connected to that sort of higher ed ecosystem of XR research, from Jeremy Bailenson at Stanford all the way up to across the country, I'm trying to think, the FIU and the School of Architecture in Florida, happy to do so, and really would encourage you to do 2 things. One is attend the CoSN annual conference. It's in Austin. It's awesome, and all of if you're participating, are awesome as that. As this annual conference is, and I see you all there every year anyway. The second thing I would say is definitely check out the work of the Center for Universal Education at Brookings. The link is in the chat, and the center started 20 years ago. So it's in its 20th year now, and it started as this kind of humble, small think tank that focused on low and middle income countries. And now it's at the absolute vanguard of researching policy around emerging technology, around community schools, around the role of parents, et cetera. So I couldn't say enough good things about CUE at Brookings, and encourage you to take a look. But please do reach out if you have questions, or you want to get connected to, or you want to help start to build a community of practice around XR in K through 12. Very, very happy to help.
Thank you. And then get another minute for questions here. Does not seem like we have any. So I know Jill's on the call. In the if there's anything you want to wrap up with, Jill, or if it's we can certainly keep talking.
No, this has been a really interesting and great conversation. So it's just the start, as we all know, and this is a wonderful piece to add into our library of conversations to share. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you for having us.
Ready.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Joe.
Welcome.
Take care, everyone.